There's a massive narrative reality gap in the market right now. While the headlines scream that companies are retreating from sustainability, the data shows that only 3% have actually paused their work. Today, we're looking at why green hushing is real, but green quitting is a myth. We'll explore why the smartest CFOs are moving sustainability data out of the marketing silo and straight into the controller's office to drive real enterprise value. Welcome to the pre-read. Just like the slides you get before a big meeting, the pre-read prepares you, CFOs, and other executives for the next big thing. It's the global podcast where finance, sustainability, audit, and risk teams come together in the C-suite.
If you're making decisions at scale or need to understand the leaders who are, you're in the right place. This is the pre-read, brought to you by Workiva.
I'm Melissa Zucker, sustainability nerd and equal opportunist caffeine addict. While I'm without my co-host and Diet Coke aficionado, Steve Soder, I'm joined today by our producer, Mike.
Hello, and thanks for having me, Alyssa. First time in front of the mic on the show, and I'm excited. Mike Gravano here, longtime podcaster and recovering cherry Coke addict. Today's episode, we're going to check in on a topic that's seen a lot of, I don't know how to say, evolution over the past few years in how we treat it, sustainability. It does feel like maybe we're at a turning point for how businesses are approaching it. In your expert opinion, what's going on?
You know, Mike, I think evolution is actually a great word to describe sustainability right now. And there's a couple key things that I see going on across the market. The first is, frankly, diverging needs across global markets. You have regions like EMEA and APAC that are really pushing forward with quite clear disclosure mandates. You know, you have CSRD, you have ISSB aligned requirements, all of which are for integrated reporting. Whereas in the North American markets, the focus, and really in the US, is really on value-driven sustainability with a direct financial impact. And with those kind of diverging needs comes the second point on shifts in vocabulary, where especially in the US, where we have anti-ESG policy that is really causing a lot of companies to de-risk their sustainability approach, you're seeing them shift to more of a heads-down focus that avoids the headlines and the flashy media coverage, but nonetheless in their programs and investments remains ambitious and particularly tied to financial materiality. And so, of course, with that, we reach the real evolution stage, but the integration of sustainability with corporate strategy and financial planning. And the shift that we see in the US is to really anchor sustainability on enterprise value and financial materiality. And that's a really important milestone kind of in the evolution of sustainability, and one that, as we said in the opener, kind of really de-silos and almost forces an integration of sustainability out of any specific team or department and into the core corporate strategy and financial planning process.
That makes so much sense to me because, one, it gives you coverage for however different administrations are going to treat this, right? Because you're like, no, look, it is important to our stakeholders and to the growth of the company, and probably also gets away from greenwashing, because if you're tying it to all those things now, it has to be real. So if it feels like a positive.
I actually think it is. It's like the silver lining. And by frankly forcing the sustainability profession and teams to speak in the vernacular and the vocabulary of the finance teams with financial metrics and capital planning and, NPV, like by really transforming sustainability investments into that financial vernacular, that's where you have the real integration. And you see, oh, this really is a core part of how we can increase our enterprise value, of how we can do a better job at our business.
Yeah, that makes up, and it not that I think this, but maybe it makes those finance folks treat you and your brethren seriously, not like hippy dippies.
I think it gives you a little bit of backing. It kind of lets you go up and play in the major leagues and really have a seat at the table, because you are actually showing sustainability as a core value driver and not just a values-driven initiative. All right, so that brings us to today's guest. My sustainability sibling, Mark Mellon, sat down with Grant Harrison, who's the VP of Sustainable Finance and ESG at Trellis Group. Grant leads content development and peer networks, which means he's regularly connecting with industry leaders from all over. So he's here to explain why the political noise that you hear in the news isn't actually stopping the work inside the Fortune 500. What stood out to you from that conversation, Mike?
It is the, and I love a phrase. I love people who coin, like, this is what we say now. So green hushing is a phrase used, is not green quitting. Kind of what we talked about is that companies are becoming quieter. They're less flashy and trying to get attention because they don't want attention to avoid that political noise. That underlying operational work and data pipelines that kind of had been built and working towards before the current administration is still all in operation. That's awesome. And it is what you just said is that uniting everything. That the smart companies, they're no longer treating it this sustainability reporting as checking the box exercise that just looks good. It's treating disclosures as a byproduct of good decision making, informing M&A and capital expenditure, and integrating everywhere. So it's not silos, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. They're creating that single data core. So let's satisfy everybody, California, EU, and the international requirements simultaneously.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's really about yes, while disclosure mandates are so often the kind of stick that's driving companies to take action and move forward, there is so much unrealized value in the carrot if you're not thinking about this in the right way. All right, so with that, let's get to Mark's conversation with Grant Harrison.
Grant, thanks for being here with us today. There's a perception that companies are pulling back on sustainability due to the current political climate, and that's been the case for some time now, especially in the US. However, our recent 2026 benchmark found that only 3% of companies have actually paused or reduced their disclosures. From your vantage point at Trellis Group, how are you seeing companies actually behave behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think the actual story here is the narrative reality gap, not so much the reduction in disclosure or reduction in action that is behind that disclosure. I think the political noise creates the perception of some kind of wholesale retreat. Political noise can theoretically be tuned out, keep politics over here and keep business activity over here. But in the world we operate in, if the political noise is loud enough, it can drown out some of the noise on the business side of the spectrum. But again, that's simply the noise part, the green hushing that does happen to some degree, and we see this. We host conferences, we host networks. Like, companies do have to change their tack and how they communicate, but green hushing does not correlate with green quitting, if that's a phrase. So quieter publicly, but continuing the underlying operational work is really what's at stake here, what's at play. I think it's also, once disclosure infrastructure is built, it doesn't just get dismantled because the political noise changes, and we're kind of accustomed to the political noise changing back and forth in the landscape that we operate in, and the infrastructure that's behind that, both, again, the reporting infrastructure and then actually the work that is being reported on, doesn't get dismantled in tune with the changing noise. A team's working on the work, the systems built, the data pipelines, there's many business functions beyond just reporting as well. So these are not things that are going to, again, be built and dismantled and built and dismantled. So luckily for us, who care about this topic moving forward, it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but I think it's largely multiple steps forward. And yeah, I think that 3% stat that you mentioned matches what we see at Trellis, the huge gap between the public narrative and what's happening inside companies. And again, I'll emphasize at Trellis, I get to see 2 vantage points of how companies are talking about and doing the work. One is in the more public setting, like what you see with us at GreenBiz and other public-facing events. The other is the Trellis network we run with 150 or so Fortune 500 companies in a Chatham House kind of peer-to-peer setting. And that's where it's really evident that the work goes on in those settings where they don't have to calibrate what they say so much. And that applies also to the investor side of the equation. Investors are hit especially hard by the political headwinds. And when investor practitioners come to our network to maybe have a more private conversation with companies about what they're expecting from them on both their disclosure, but their sustainability performance, it hasn't changed. I started doing this, 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating to hear that perspective, especially from the field where you have the executive network. And I think it mirrors, as you mentioned, the data you see and the data that we're seeing. The headlines might scream backlash, but I think the reality is much more resilient. It really shows how corporate leaders are trying to decouple the work from the political noise. So not too long ago on our GreenBiz panel, we discussed with the global regulatory momentum, noting that nearly 40 jurisdictions are moving forward and toward ISSB aligned disclosures, or International Sustainability Standards Board, for integrated sustainability and financial reporting. How are you seeing sustainability, finance, and risk teams starting to work together to navigate these multi-jurisdictional reporting requirements?
ISSB is essentially forcing sustainability out of its silo. That's like one of the core themes that we talk about in the sustainability profession, is that it can't operate in a silo. It has to be integrated into the business. And that's easier said than done. But the fact that financial grade data standards are what they are and are asking for this kind of information in these 40 jurisdictions means sustainability just has to live closer to the finance function, and particularly the controller's office. And it can't do so superficially. It has to be quite plugged in to meet what's being asked. Companies that want to build infrastructure that will last are building one data backbone, not jurisdiction by jurisdiction. They're meeting, ISSB is one thing, but there's California's SB 253 and 261. There's CSRD, however pared back that has become, and whatever comes after that, in the next, again, going back to the political winds, they do shift. They don't blow in one direction. So having that single data backbone also means being plugged into those other functions that you brought up, risk and the CSO's office. This CFO conversation has been always a key theme at an event like GreenBiz, and in the last year or two, it is one that has accelerated because that convergence between CSO and CFO is real and kind of made real by this adoption you're talking about. If we were having this conversation 8 years ago, it was still maybe a little more theoretical and aspirational. But yeah, sustainability reporting moving under or adjacent to finance means this is like an actual convergence, not just a theoretical conversation. On the risk integration piece, or the risk management role specifically, ISSB standards S2 requires climate scenario analysis. CSRD requires double materiality. Both are enterprise risk management exercises. Sustainability identifies the risk, connecting them to financial impact and stress testing the balance sheet is the risk team's job, but those two have to go together. I think companies where those three teams are still siloed are going to struggle.
A big theme that I took away from the GreenBiz conference and also the NASSERS conference a couple weeks after was that danger of a compliance-only mindset. How are the smartest companies you talk to using their sustainability data to influence corporate strategy and really drive enterprise value rather than just treating it as a regulatory check-the-box exercise?
The compliance mindset, or the compliance trap of sorts, is, I guess, one of the biggest risks right now to some degree. Companies spending an enormous amount of resources building disclosure machinery and infrastructure, all to the effect of producing a PDF that goes on a website or some kind of output that's tangible, but viewed as an expensive compliance function to some degree. Companies getting it right treat the disclosure as a byproduct of good decision making, not a output of something that was, machine built to produce PDF outcome, but actually good decision making comes first, and the outcome is a byproduct that can be used strategically, not as a document like I'm referencing. The report should be easy to produce because the data is already being used to run the business, ideally. Again, it's not something that lands and goes, like what you're saying, check the box, moves on. Both CSRD and ISSB force you to, or encourage you to, systematically identify which issues or which sustainability topics matter most. So I guess the compliance approach version is do the exercise, produce a nice looking matrix or visual, and move on. Strategic approach is take all those findings to the C-suite, hopefully to the friends you are now closer with in the finance function, and say these are the issues that actually create or destroy value for this company, unrelated to whatever mandate we have to report this information under fill-in-the-blank acronym disclosure regime. This is how it's going to create or destroy value over the next short time horizon. This is not something that, obviously, when we talk about sustainability issues, we're talking about issues that affect companies in the 50-year, 100-year, like existential realm, but it's also things that affect value in the next 5 or 10 years, or even shorter time horizons, which we know our system is kind of accustomed to looking at. But the same goes for transition planning, one that only lives in your sustainability report as a compliance function, if you are, in fact, asked to do that as a compliance function, is kind of such a waste of time and potential and energy and resources when a transition plan can inform your capital expenditure, your M&A approach, your product development, your planning around your workforce. Like, this is a gift that can keep on giving, and kind of has to keep on giving, because the issues we're talking about are, again, existential in the long run. As someone who is not subject to compliance, it's really easy for me to say, like, break out of the compliance mindset and do these three things. So it's obviously harder than the way I'm laying it out, but I heard progress being made and whispered about in hallways at GreenBiz.
This year, the conversation around business transformation is going global. We're hitting cities throughout APAC, Europe, and the Americas with Workiva's Accelerate 2026 event series. We know the pressure is on. Finance, risk, and sustainability leaders are being asked to move faster than ever. But speed means nothing without a foundation of data you can actually trust. Accelerate 2026 is where you move from theory to practice. You'll get hands-on with responsible AI use cases, dive into data modernization, and join roundtable discussions with peers who are solving the exact same challenges you face every day. This is your chance to see the latest Workiva innovations firsthand and learn how to drive performance through integrated governance. Better decisions and strategic value start here. Find a city near you and register today at workiva.com/PR-events. That's WORKIVA.com/PR-events. Connect, learn, and get inspired.
Part of moving beyond just creating a PDF, what we're hearing is companies creating more dashboards for management to make those decisions and collecting that data more than once a year, whether it's quarterly or potentially more frequently. So it's not just a reporting exercise that's done once a year. The other thing I want to touch on, because as somebody who's a CPA by background, this is a passion of mine, in just the ability to create or destroy value and taking that to the C-suite. I mean, that is incredibly important. And it's how a company works amongst those three teams that we talked about: sustainability, financial reporting or accounting, audit, risk, and compliance, and brings all of their skills together to really understand the potential impact of those risks and opportunities from a sustainability lens, and the potential impact on financial statements, because that's probably a big part of what the C-suite is going to care about. And the sooner that companies can start to develop ways, which the ISSB provides some of these ways to think about the actual impacts on the financial statements as well as the anticipated impacts, because that's what's potentially going to happen in a year or less in some instances, and maybe it's 5 years in some instances as well. But I'm really excited about the move that I'm seeing in the market to attach those financial metrics, because I do think that's where we'll see the rubber starting to hit the road. Thinking about where sustainability fits into the CFO mandate for driving value, digital transformation, navigating volatility, what are some top opportunities you see for CFOs to leverage sustainability and sustainability information to meet those goals?
Starting with like a reframe of sorts, which is not framing these opportunities that we talk about as sustainability opportunities, but framing them as, I don't know, more vanilla CFO financial film, like no qualifier financial opportunities where sustainability is what is providing an edge, informational edge or predictive edge or some kind of edge. So I guess the reframe of sustainability being the thing that informs it, but not the outcome that you're going after, because you still get the same outcome. The cost of capital optimization, like how sustainability data sharpens cost of capital optimization, portfolio strategy, things like that. I don't think most CFOs are fully leveraging this yet. I think it's a source of advantage. On that cost of capital piece, the green bond and sustainability linked product loan or bond market has matured. Different case here in the US than it is in Europe in a number of ways, but it still has matured significantly. I think CFOs with credible strategies backed by real data can access capital at better terms. And again, that's something that, going back to the start of this conversation, political winds go one direction and the other. This cost of capital theme is one that I don't think we're going to really ever fully backtrack on. It might do a little bit of the one step forward, half a step back that I talked about earlier, but that's one that I think is worth highlighting here. The insurance side of this, climate risk exposure directly affecting premiums and coverage, like that is, I mean, I just joined you from a heat wave in the Bay Area where I think the average temperature was 34 degrees over the average for that chunk of March. Like, this is becoming more and more the norm. And I think it's finally coming to the point where the reports on that are not like, wow, can you believe it's 30 degrees over and the impacts of this? What an ephemeral kind of strange trend. I think it's really becoming recognized that this is the lived reality we're living through, and that is hugely impactful on companies' bottom line. Digital transformation feels worth mentioning. The natural connection between the data systems and controls that we're talking about and governance built for sustainability reporting is a good foundation for broader enterprise data strategy outside of just the sustainability orbit. And CFOs investing in sustainability data infrastructure is also at the same time probably investing in digital capabilities more broadly. So same investment with multiple purposes. I don't know if a CFO would hear that and nod along with me or say, I don't agree, but that's how I perceive it.
I mean, I think that makes sense. And it may be the head of supply chain that nods with you and agrees and says, yes, I want to have fewer potentially vendor relationships, especially if I can have, one platform that helps manage all of these challenges across financial reporting, sustainability reporting, audit risk, and compliance. The other thing I think we didn't mention, but is worth mentioning, climate and sustainability related risk and opportunities, especially those that are financially material, are business risks and opportunities, right, that need to be managed. And from my perspective, in an integrated way to the way that companies manage any other business risk and opportunities. And again, I feel like I've been beating the drum on this, but I'm going to beat it just a little bit harder, that attaching the financial impact, actual impact, and anticipated impact the way ISSB recommends companies do, and where companies are being required to do in some instances, it is, I think, a good way for CFOs to understand where the rubber meets the road there.
I think maybe if you play some mandolin and beat the drum, you'll really get people to listen. So
the mandolin is like the drum of the bluegrass music, so it's basically like beating the drum.
Well put.
Thank you again to our guest, Grant Harrison. And thank you for listening.
This has been The Pre-Read, brought to you by Workiva, the world's only unified platform for financial reporting, sustainability, audit, and risk.
We've got more insights and hot takes coming your way, so be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your edge.
If you like the show, leave a review, send it to someone you love, or just shout it out on your next team call.
We'll see you next time, but until then, go lead it like you mean it.
I'm Mike Gravano, and that's Alyssa Zucker. Segment reporting was conducted by Mark Mellon, with audio engineering by Drew Hayes and Tanner Heinrichs.
Pedro Sousa is our graphic designer. Transcripts are created and edited by Courtney Kimsey. Thanks to our digital and social team, Mike Berg, Katie Carr, and Michael Karnowski.